Fantastic, man. No, oh, there we go. There's Adam. Perfect timing. Let's see. Yesterday we tested this and he was struggling a little bit with getting his microphone and his camera.
Can you
Yep.
hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you.
So I can see you, Tompkins. Can you see me? I can't.
Yes, I can. Well, no, we can't see. I don't know. Josh, can you see him?
I can hear you, but I just see your name.
Ah,
Oh, there we go.
Yeah. Got pizza in the mouth.
Oh, awesome. Well, again, a thank you to both of you so very, very much for taking the time to do this interview. I was so happy to stumble upon the latest album from Lord Helmet, of course, available now. I've gotten the chance to be able to review it with some uh, mistakes in there, accidental mistakes. But when you cover 600 album reviews, there's bound to be a mistake or two in there. And I'm fortunately it happened here, but I did correct it going forward. But I absolutely love what both of you guys do. I just keep listening to the music over and over because it's my style of prog where it's just fun to listen to. It's not just wanking all the time. You're not doing a half hour of music that has like no bearing behind it for each song. Like every song feels like it's meant to be heard and have some fun with it. And if you can't do that in progressive music, it's just not really for me. And I love what you guys do with that.
Oh man, but thank you.
Thank you.
That's amazing.
Oh, absolutely.
I am, as I said, in a message to you a few days ago, you really seem to get what we do. You know,
I know my dog was up.
the
Mom,
way you sort of described it, the way you sort of described it as, something that on paper shouldn't work, but that somehow does, is I think, um, that I think that really sums it up. And in a lot of ways, is what we are and have been going for. And I think, that blending of that, that more kind of whatever 80s kind of early post-punk kind of sensibility, certainly melodically, and blending that with heavier elements, both from, the 70s, like early King Crimson, and then even up through, like Tool and Jane's Addiction was a big influence when doing this record. As well, and Deftones. So it's kind of bringing all of these things together, and the fact that I'm not sure that everyone gets it. Everyone who hears it, some people might be kind of confused with the leapfrogging of genres. But when people do get it, it's super gratifying. So we appreciate that.
No, absolutely. So, with that in mind, I mean, what was it like to start writing for this particular album?
Adam, do you want to take that? Pizza Man.
Well, really, for this album, and a lot of them kind of went a little different, but for this album, Dave just sends me recordings of skeletons of songs with like programmed drums. And so I listen to that, okay. And then I always request to hear it without the programmed drums so I can kind of get my own vision. But I think it's cool sometimes to, some drummers get, a little weird about hearing a performance first, even if a computer does a good job. But I don't, because I'm like, well, if something sounds real fat, programmed, then, it's just my job to beat that, So if I'm putting my own thing down and it's dumber than a fat program beat, then I know I'm sucking, So it's always good to be able to compare something and hear something there. And it lets me know where kind of Dave hears a pocket, does he hear it in cut time or double time or whatever? And I can change that, sometimes I do. Sometimes I'll be like, all right, everything you sent me is just straight down the line, with the 2 and the 4 on the snare, and I'll separate it in half that time, or I'll cut stuff up that way. But where everything's done from a distance and it's all done to a metronome, I can cut up his riffs or his song ideas and make a verse longer or make something shorter. Or sometimes certain songs, there might be one little part of a riff that I'll loop and be like Come What May, for example. He had one little riff in there that we looped and it just became like a main theme or whatever, And so, and we didn't know that would happen. I just sometimes I'll go, oh, I could play a bigger beat if that riff looped for a little bit, And so some of the songs get get kind of tampered with like that. But in general, Dave writes the music. I'm a drummer. I don't write anything. He's the multi instrumentalist that is creating every single melody that you hear. I'll take no credit for that. I just do a lot of arranging with Dave, and we cut stuff up back and forth until stuff happens. And even long stuff like when the land meets the sea. He just would send me a handful of riffs and be like, "Oh, there's just good stuff all over the place," and sometimes I'd be too busy to get to it, but I'd be listening to the riffs for like a month or two, and then Dave would get impatient and be like, "Put this whole thing together that just rules," And I'm like, "Wow, okay," and then I don't have to do as much work, even though I have a lot of ideas, and then I'd come back and say, "But we should tweak this and this and this and this," and just a lot of back and forth going on. None of this stuff is just quickly done. That's the main thing. So, I mean, as far as how are the songs created, well, Dave writes a lot of rad riffs, and we tamper with them for several years until they're where they need to be. And then even when they're 80% done, saying bye to my kids. Say bye.
Bye.
Go have fun.
Okay.
I forget where I was out there, but anyways,
Several years devoted to tweaking riffs.
yeah, and that's basically where it is. And once we get a song like 70% there, then we'll sit on it for like 8 months sometimes, or sometimes a year, or sometimes a month, and go, let's just tweak that a little, or extend that middle eight, or trim the fat here. And then when the vocals come in, then the arrangements slightly can change even more now that we have a vocal idea that makes it what it is. All right, we need to extend things. So there's just a lot of chopping, pulling, and the beauty of it is me and Dave, and I can never say this about any other musician or project I've ever worked with, is we don't argue ever. Like, out of the 3 records, we could criticize each other and never get upset about it. He could be like, "Nah, man, I just need more fills there. It's just kind of boring." I'm like, "Okay, I got to step that up." Or, "You're a little sloppy right there. I need you to tighten that piece up." And it's like, cool. And he's the same way with he's never sloppy, for one, but with vocals, I'll critique his vocals probably more than anything, or song arrangements, but he's never playing his instrument wrong. That's for sure. That makes it really easy to put drums to and create to, because they're all to a metronome, and they're all played very skillfully. So it's kind of a drummer's dream as far as laying tracks down, because I could play to just a metronome with no music and just do it all in my head, but I can groove a lot harder if the music's already to the metronome, and I can create that way. So anyways, I talked a lot, but figured that covers some bases.
Josh, you're a drummer too, is that right?
I am. I actually do have my snares all along here right now in my apartment. I got like the Mike Portnoy snare, Vinnie Paul snare, a couple different ones going on. And I actually did want to bring up the drums on this particular album, because one of the things I find the most striking about this album is actually the snare as well. It's just I love how it sounds like such a high crank sounding snare, but it also sounds like a cannon at the same time on this particular album. Was that something that you were just like going for, or do you just think it just sounded cool and you went with it, or how did that come to be?
I guess I should answer that one. So it came out a little bit more verby than I had planned, but I mean, we trigger it. So straight up, there's a blend. There's the only really notes you're hearing much that's real on my part, other than the trigger, is maybe some grace notes. You know what I mean? But in general, I use the Stephen Slate triggers, and I combine 3 different snares to make that sound. And I combine Chad Smith's snare, and I combine Abe Cunningham's White Pony Deftone snare, and I combine Led Zeppelin's samples. So that gives you that punch, but also gives you the roominess of the older Zeppelin kind of thing. So it does the room sound thing, and it does the crack, both. We were a little hesitant, like, man, is it a little too much? Because it is different. And traditionally I would go for a little bit drier of a snare sound, because sometimes that can muddy up the music if it gets a little too verby. And I had a real good friend of mine was commenting, "Oh man, it's a bit verby there." he does a lot of production, and I'm like, well, so is Pantera's snare on Vulgar Display of Power, you know. And he's like, no, you can't compare. And I'm like, well, I guess I can't, but Terry Date did do that one too, and it was the Terry Date package that I sampled. Um, so you know, that's the cool thing about any kind of sound in music. You can blend sounds to be whatever you want until it sounds cool, you know, and everyone has their fixer fancy and, oh, I don't like that or I do. But at the end of the day, me and Dave both, you know, whether or not we wanted more verb on the snare or less or whatever, the fact is that everything sonically blends fat and huge, and you know, and unless we're going to try to do a very dry Black Sabbath thing, which this record is not, then why not just go balls out and like give it that big fat sound that's kind of a mix between some big Terry Date productions and some big 80s snare productions, like a kind of a mix of both. I mean, Jane's Addiction Nothing Shocking has a big fat reverby snare too, you know, and same with like, you know, some of the old kind of when the 90s was not quite there yet, like Alice in Chains Facelift, you know. I know Toby Wright that produced that record as well, you know, big snare sound. So it was a little risky, but at the end of the day, it sounds fat. And like you said, I don't play a million notes, and we're not jerking off all over the place. So, you know, big, fat, roomy sounds what we want, you know. And I try to prog out just enough to be like, all right, I can get technical when needed, but I am a lazy drummer. I don't spend all my time trying to be the most technical person. I'd much rather play fat beats, you know what I mean? So, um, but yeah, there's the snare answer.
Well, I love it. I mean, if you ever start incorporating gravity blasts, I'm not entirely sure all the reverb is going to work very well for it. But other than that, I love, like the grooves that you're putting behind this. And after that initial shock of like, wow, I'm not used to hearing a snare like that, I think it fits perfectly with the music.
That's
Sweet.
cool.
Well, thank you. I'm glad you like it.
Yeah. It
And
was
you're a drummer.
yeah, there you go. Right. And I guess it's funny because I love loud drums. It's kind of weird that I'm not a drummer. It's like, I've got all this other stuff going on, but I've never, even tried to play drums. But I love loud drums. And I like loud drums. Like I like drums that are loud in the mix. Very much. And so for me, when Adam started sending me these stems, where the snare was noticeably a bit sort of whatever, it had a bit more body than we had had in the past. um I don't know, it automatically worked for me. It automatically just kind of, I kind of understood it. I mean, you know, I think that when it comes to the sort of the proggy, I'm definitely like of course I like lots of different kinds of music, but I sort of cut my teeth on prog as a young player, right? And I love that sort of late 70s, early 80s moment where prog is kind of transitioning. You've got from punk, it goes into sort of a post-punk thing where arguably, with bands like Magazine, even Bauhaus to a degree, like there's just more artistry going on, right? They're thinking about it. It's not just, or even Joy Division too, right? They're not thinking about, it's not the Sex Pistols, right? There's a little bit more artistry going on. So that kind of thing really appeals to me. And frankly, I still, kind of dig the gated, the Phil Collins gated drum thing, Um, I love that sound. I mean, I wouldn't want it on everything, but it's so distinctive and it fills up the space. And I don't know, for whatever reason, I really like as a player of, as a bassist, and in terms of where guitars and drums and I'm sorry, where guitars and keys are sitting in the mix, I just like not having the drums set up, a landscape that kind of spreads out, that I can kind of place things on top of. But in a way that doesn't bury what's on the foundation. So it really kind of worked out for us this time around in terms of that sound. And who knows, if we do another record in the future, we might take that who knows? We might do a 180 and do something like completely different, or we might, push that 80s production thing a little bit further.
Oh, yeah, that's just so cool. And again, it's just like I can just hear it between both of you, just like the chemistry that you both have, like when you're talking about this particular band, and then like talking about what both of you presents when it comes to both of this. And there's just something so great when you're able to find someone, anyone, whether it's a duo, whether it's like a full piece band, whatever the case is, when you're able to find the right people to work towards the right vision that you're looking for, it just makes everything work so much better. I mean, sometimes it works good to have like some creative differences or some different ideals and stuff. I mean, obviously there's been bands who like hate each other that are able to put out great music, but at least in my case, whenever I've been in a band, and clearly here when it comes to Lord Helmet, when you find the right people that want to make the same music that you do and want to work towards the same vision, there's just no greater feeling.
I agree, and I would say like one of the things that we agreed on because like uh, uh, in fact. I would say that Adam and I kind of, in terms of our tastes, we probably diverge more often than we converge, right? In terms of our tastes. So what we've, sort of agreed upon from the very beginning is let's only commit to that sweet spot where what you love and what I love come together, right? So like, if I send him something and he doesn't like it, that's cool, whatever. Um, it's outside of that boundary that we set up early on. And I think, the same goes in terms of things that he might suggest, although he rarely sends me stuff that I find, you know, whatever, that I don't like. But yeah, I think that's the deal is we kind of in a way it was sort of a silent contract, but I think we did talk about this a little bit and certainly have over the years where it's like let's just, stick to that sweet spot where, we both agree 100% we can stand behind everything that we do. Um, and that, there's no moment on any record where it's like, ah, man, I really let Adam get away with that, or I really let Tompkins do that thing that I hate, right? That never happens. That never happens. Um, and I, frankly, I feel the better for it because I've been in tons of bands over the years, and I've been the vocalist in the vast majority of the bands I've been in, even though I've gotten all kinds of shit from my voice over the years since I was a, teenager. Some people like it, some people don't like it. It's changed a lot over the years. It's become certainly much more mature. But the thing where I really want to tip my hat to Adam is that of all the people I've worked with over the years, he's the only one who has cared enough to try to get excellent performances out of me. Like he has a sense of this is where Tompkins sounds best. I'm going to keep pushing him to do that thing, you know? And it's like, oh God, it's so gratifying. I listened to the new record this morning for the first time in quite a while, and I was like, whatever. I don't want this to sound egotistical, but I'm really happy with my singing on it. I think it's the best thing I've ever done in terms of singing, and that's not just because I rolled up to the mic and like whatever some amazing stuff came out of me. It was I think Adam doesn't give himself as much credit as he deserves in terms of not just the arranging, but he will sing me melodies. Try this, try that. He will say, change this word or try this phrase. And he's often right most of the time when his vocal suggestions are on point. And it always makes me sound 10 times better. So that is a big one too. It's like not only, finding people that you can work with that share your enthusiasm, your vision or whatever, but people who care enough about you, right? People who care enough about their collaborators to say, I know what you're capable of. I know what you do best, and I'm going to push you to be as good as you can possibly be. That's never happened before in all the bands I've been in.
Yeah, again, you can never take that for granted when you are able to have like real true collaboration like that. Since you did bring it up for this particular album, is there any particular examples on the album that you can think of where
Of
that happened?
Yeah, well, come what may, definitely come what may. I was really stuck vocally on that song for a while. And, Adam I think at one point you recorded on your phone or something, like a vocal idea. Um, and that's what I ended up committing to. I think, I tweaked it and kind of brought in some different lyrical things here and there. But yeah, that song, I would say certainly if you listen to like the verses, there's the first part of the verse where there's a guitar riff, kind of thin riff in the background, and a big sort of synth bass, on the downbeats. And then it moves into like a pre-chorus. And those pre-choruses developed right out of the vocal ideas that Adam had. Absolutely. I just kind of wrote some music that worked with the melody that he suggested, but even down to the lyric, I think much of what I sing during those bits comes from him.
So, Adam, like, when you do get those ideas and you have ideas of wanting to make a particular section better, be it vocals, arrangement, whatever that is, like, how do you go about that? Like, do you take a lot of time to think about what could be better with that? Do you instantly hear what could be better when you hear that? Like, how do you go about that?
Well, for one, I don't spend a lot of time doing it because I like Dave to spend a lot of time without me putting an idea in his head, So I'm not trying to take away from his creativity. So if I have 2 cents to throw in for a vocal, it's usually like he's already put a lot of effort into it, or maybe he's stuck, or maybe we just need a little part. And then I go, okay, and then I spend the extra time to do it. I'm not going to sit there and take a Lord Helmet song and be like, I've got great vocal ideas and I'm going to write them and I'm going to give them to Dave. Could I do that? Yeah, but I think that takes away from the fun from him. So I'm not trying to be like, oh, I want credit. We don't do the credit thing. We're just like, we're a unit, and whether he writes everything or I do, we're just a team. So there's not like, some bands, oh, I wrote this or I wrote that, or I get a percentage of this or I get a percentage of that. We don't do that. So when you don't do that, then it doesn't make anyone feel like they need the entitlement. I don't need to have a credit on the record that says I wrote the pre-chorus for this song vocally. This interviews the extent of what I care if people know or not. That's what's kind of fun about these interviews. But it's not like, I need credit for anything. So, but I do think I have a lot. I have the worst voice anyone could ever imagine. But I have rhyme schemes and melody. If I had a voice, I would be the lead singer of a band many years ago, but I suck. So it's one of those where maybe you could program drums, but you could never play them, and you could program some rad ideas and have a real drummer play them. I could do that with vocals, but I don't do that a lot with what you're hearing on the record. There's just little bits and pieces there. Or like Dave says, he might just have, out of a song, there might be just several words I don't like the way his voice goes down, or I want it to go high or low. Like that little bugs me. Can you make it go ah? And those little things will make it to where I'm like, all right, I didn't like it, now I do. And he's really good at going, okay, I'll try that. And sometimes I'll give him an idea and it'll suck, no big deal. And we'll move on. So, but I have with some other stuff, just briefly, I haven't spent much time, but I've got ideas here and there for songs where me and my son recorded a song and I wrote all the lyrics and the rhyme schemes and had a female vocalist come in and sing the lyrics. And actually me and Dave tampered with a singer when we first got this going, and I wrote some lyrics and had him sing them. And we never used that singer. We just decided, why didn't Dave just do it? Whenever we did do that in the very early days, it just gave Dave a reason to go, no, I could do better, or I could make this where we don't have to deal with the third person. And that's the beauty of this band, is we don't have to deal with someone else's trying to get writer's block for 8 months. Oh yeah, you'll get your vocals in 8 months. And we're like, whatever, like we can just get it done when we want, just the two of us. So
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's another great thing that isn't talked about enough. I mean, obviously, there's so many reasons why it happens the other way, but when you have no pressure whatsoever and you just want to make the songs that you want to make them when you want to make them, when you have the inspiration to do it, when you have the time to do it, rather than feeling like you're forced. And again, there's examples where bands and albums are made in a time crunch and they're like some of the best albums ever made. But, you know, just from that mental health aspect, just from life in general, when you're able to do this when you want to, how you want to, and put it out when it's done, I mean, to me, that feels like such a better accomplishment because you're really putting your heart and soul into it when you don't feel like you have an obligation behind it. You can just do it the way that you want to.
Agreed. I mean, that's we nitpick to death. There's no way if we had gone into a studio to do these records, they wouldn't sound. And I'm not saying like they're the most amazing records ever produced, but they wouldn't be what they are. That's for sure. There's no engineer on earth that is going to sit around and deal with our nitpicks. I mean, it's just an onslaught of nitpicks, man, and it goes on really since from the first note, that I send Adam or the first, pocket he sends me, the nitpicks kick in, and they really hit hard at the end, for sure. It took me forever. Mixing this record was such a challenge, such a challenge. There was a point where I was just like, I think I've met my match. But then I had a breakthrough, and we had a couple of we had at least, well, we had one fan in particular, this guy Mark, who's been a champion of ours from the very beginning, who's an artist in his own right, who was so generous with his time, and he helped me through some issues I was having with the mix, which was super helpful. And then I also kind of incorporated in some new gear that had a big that played a big role too. But all of this to say, I agree completely. Having the ability to have our own studios, to record at our own pace, to get performances the way we want them, as opposed to having to like rush through something and like every time you hear it down the road, you're like, yeah, if only I had played that better, right? We never have that. Are there in hindsight, like when I listened to our first album, yeah, there are a couple of things now, 6 years later, that I would love to go back and tweak. And we've been talking about revisiting that first record and maybe doing like a whatever, a kind of a remixed edition with some new vocals, like just slightly different approach, and a remix and a remaster and maybe a different song order. Because that album, we didn't really know who we were, what we were doing. I just had a bunch of songs, and they were actually most of them written for another band I was in at the time. And originally I thought, well, maybe this will be a solo record. And then Adam and I had already been working on this other project as a collaboration. And I said, what about these songs? He was into them. So we decided, let's do that first. Then we went back to the songs that we'd started writing together with that other singer he mentioned. And we developed all of that. That became the second record. And then this record, we started from nothing, both of us collaborating from the get-go. And I think that it's this record where we really figured out this is who we are, this is what we sound like, this is what we do. And knowing that now does, I think, make both of us want to go back and we could probably do a little special edition of that first of that first record. Try not to get too George Lucasy in terms of how much we change, but just maybe not. Let's not add a Jar Jar, but let's but let's do a couple of tweaks, especially in the vocal department, that would make some of those songs hit a little bit better. We'll see if that happens. It may or may not. It depends on, if we get super inspired to do another record, that would probably take precedent over going back in time.
Oh yeah, I was just gonna say that that would be a really cool idea if, the time ever comes where that could happen. But I'm also wondering, like, when you mentioned like this is the album where it feels like everything is starting to go in the right direction, you know what Lord Helmet is, and you know this is where you want to go going forward. Has that inspiration hit you yet for like any musical ideas yet?
I didn't think that it would. Um, and I haven't started writing anything yet, but I have been listening a lot to some other artists in addition, and listening to them in relation to the most recent album. And I'm starting to feel like there might be. I had a period because it took us 3.5 years to do this. This record took the longest of the three. And that wasn't just because of the record itself. A lot of other stuff was going on. It's a complicated time. Um, but I have been thinking we might have more to do, actually. I was for a long time I thought maybe this is the, this is our whatever. This is our another Star Wars reference. This is our, the conclusion of the trilogy, right? But I don't know. I'm starting to think that the given the confidence that I certainly have now, having done this last record, um, I'm feeling inspired. So who knows? I think that if ultimately we start getting some stuff that we both like and we're inspired and it feels like this is badass, I think for us it comes down to this. Is what we're doing now, could any of these songs easily fit on the last record and maybe best the songs on that record? That was definitely what we talked about when we were making this one. Like, okay, here's the baseline is this. Everything that we do, that we put out, has to be as good as what we did last time or better. I think we ended up, I think, doing better. I think it's at the end of the day, it's a stronger record than the first one. So I would hope that, if we did another one, that would be the case again, that we would do it because we were confident that we could go even further, that we could make an even better record. I don't know, Adam, are you on board with
No,
that?
I think so. And that's definitely what we did with this last record is we wanted to make sure it was better than Get Back to the Ship, which I love both the records to be honest, but I think this one's better. And that says a lot because I kind of when we started on this record, I'm like, I don't know, Dave, did we kind of like do the best we could do on Get Back to the Ship? That might be like I don't know what else to do. Like what paradiddle is going to make it cooler, like but it really boils down to songwriting, chemistry, like bigness of riffs and so that's where I think we just stepped up on a wall of sound more. I think Moth had that on the last record. Moth was definitely um, probably the best song that compares to what we're doing. That and Nothing to See. Those two were the closest to this record, I think. Um, but yeah, but I think that even moving forward, instead of trying to just like beat it, because I think this record is similar to Get Back to the Ship. They definitely sound like they go hand in hand. I just think it's bigger, a little bigger and more mature, and the vocals and guitars are a little tastier and better done. It's the biggest difference between I think on those two records is that upgrade there. But we could always do something different that someone may not think is better. We have a lot of psychedelic backgrounds where we could go, hey, let's tap into that Miles Davis Bitches Brew, Dark Side of the Moon, Animals, Radiohead atmospheric type of thing. And maybe it wouldn't be as heavy, but we could really get weird and go to some places that we haven't really tampered with before, and maybe some people would think that's better, but that's just, to each their own, I mean, did people like, Octung Baby better than, Joshua Tree? Like it's just different, they went to a different place or, early Radiohead stuff like the Bins. Some people love the Bins, but, I personally like Kid A way better, because it gets all weird, so it's I think there's a lot of room for us to screw around with some different areas we haven't before. And we've talked about doing some covers too, which we haven't nailed it like this is what we're going to do, but we have a couple ideas from some 80s influence that if you want to talk about that, Dave, you can, or we can wait on that. It don't matter. But I mean, I think it'd be kind of cool to even put something out where there's like a 10-minute epic that just kills you, and then there's a bunch of psychedelia and then a couple covers or something, and then it's like, whoa, well, that's not what you guys have done. It would be really unexpected, so maybe doing something that's a curveball but it's got some aspects that are still us but go a little trippier and spacey or something, and maybe something that inspires us both as musicians to step it up. I don't feel like I'm a better musician on the first record to the third record. I just I've been playing a long time and I do my thing,
Um, I,
mature.
I
Go
I
ahead.
do have to say, there's less than a minute left until Zoom cuts off. I'm very sorry about that.
No, you're good.
But I just wanted to say before this cuts off, I just wanted to thank you guys so much for taking the time to do this interview. I